When a little black boy named Jaden says, "The babysitter did it again," his mother's world shatters. In a panic, she calls 911 immediately. But as the truth unravels, she's left wondering, what secrets could be hiding behind the babysitter's seemingly innocent face? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Kim sighed as she fumbled with her keys, balancing a bag of groceries on her hip. The hallway of her apartment building echoed with her footsteps as she made her way to her door. It had been another long day at work, and her feet ached in her sensible shoes. As she entered the small apartment, her heart lifted at the sight of her son, Jaden. The 8-year-old boy looked up from his coloring book, his face breaking into a wide smile. "Mommy!" he exclaimed, jumping up to hug her. Kim set down the groceries and wrapped her arms around him, breathing in the scent of his hair. "Hey, sweetheart, how was your day?" Jaden launched into a detailed account of his day at school, his words tumbling out in excitement. Kim listened intently, her tired eyes softening with love. She hated leaving him alone so often, but she was determined to give him the best life possible. As she prepared dinner, Kim couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. She glanced at Jaden, who was now absorbed in a TV show. "I'm sorry I'm not home more, honey," she said softly. Jaden looked up, his big brown eyes full of understanding beyond his years. "It's okay, Mom. I know you're working hard for us." Kim's heart swelled with pride and love. She was doing her best, but the guilt of leaving him with babysitters gnawed at her. If only there was a better solution. The next day, as Kim was picking up Jaden from his current babysitter, Mrs. Johnson, an elderly neighbor approached them with a warm smile. "Kim, dear, I've been meaning to talk to you," the woman said, her eyes twinkling. "I heard you've been looking for a more permanent childcare solution." Kim nodded, curiosity piqued. "Yes, that's right. Do you know someone?" The woman beamed. "As a matter of fact, I do. My friend's daughter, Milda, just moved into the building. She's a wonderful babysitter with years of experience." As if on cue, a friendly-looking woman in her mid-30s stepped out of a nearby apartment. She had a kind face and a welcoming smile. "Oh, speak of the devil," the elderly neighbor chuckled. "Kim, this is Milda. Milda, this is Kim and her son, Jaden." Milda extended her hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "It's lovely to meet you both," she said warmly. "I've heard so much about you from Mrs. Thompson here." Kim felt a wave of relief wash over her. Maybe this was the answer to her prayers. She smiled back at Milda, hope blooming in her chest. As the days passed, Milda became a regular fixture in Kim and Jaden's lives. Every morning, Milda dropped on Kim and Jaden's off-house. The routine seemed to be working well, and Kim felt a sense of relief wash over her. One morning, as Kim was getting ready to leave, she noticed Jaden was unusually quiet. His small hands clutched his backpack straps tightly, and his eyes were fixed on the floor. "Honey, is everything okay?" Kim asked, kneeling down to meet his gaze. Jaden nodded silently, but his eyes didn't quite meet hers. Kim's brow furrowed with concern. "Are you sure? You can tell me if something's bothering you," she pressed gently. Jaden shrugged, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's fine, Mom. I'm just tired." Kim bit her lip, worry gnawing at her insides. She glanced at her watch and sighed. She was already running late for work. "Okay, sweetie, but remember you can always talk to me about anything, all right?" She gave him a quick hug and a kiss on the forehead. Kim's thoughts raced. Was Jaden just shy around his new babysitter? Did he miss his old routine? She tried to reassure herself that it was normal for children to need time to adjust to changes. Milda opened the door with her usual warm smile. "Good morning, Kim." "Hello, Jaden," she greeted cheerfully. Kim managed a smile in return. "Good morning, Milda. Jaden's been a bit quiet this morning. I think he might still be getting used to the new arrangement." Milda nodded understandingly. "Oh, that's perfectly normal. Don't worry, Kim. We'll have a great day together, won't we, Jaden?" Jaden nodded silently, his eyes still downcast. Kim hesitated for a moment, her maternal instincts urging her to stay. But she pushed the feeling aside, reminding herself that Milda was experienced and came highly recommended. "All right, I'd better get going," Kim said, giving Jaden one last hug. "Be good for Milda, okay? I love you." "Love you too, Mom," Jaden mumbled. As Kim walked away, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her gut, but she had to trust that everything would be fine. Milda was a professional, after all. Jaden just needed time to adjust. With a deep breath, Kim stepped out of the building and headed to work, leaving her son in Milda's care. As the weeks passed, Kim couldn't help but notice subtle changes in Jaden's behavior. The once talkative and cheerful boy had become increasingly quiet and withdrawn. At first, Kim brushed it off as a phase, but a nagging worry began to grow in the back of her mind. One evening, as Kim tucked Jaden into bed, she noticed him flinch when she mentioned Milda's name. "Sweetie, is everything okay with Milda?" Kim asked gently, smoothing his hair. Jaden's eyes darted away, focusing on a spot on the wall. "It's fine," he mumbled, pulling the covers up to his chin. Kim frowned, her heart aching at her son's evasiveness. She wanted to press further, but exhaustion from her long workday tugged at her consciousness. "Okay, honey, but remember, you can always talk to me about anything." As days turned into weeks, Kim noticed more worrying signs. Jaden's shoulders would slump when Milda arrived each morning. He'd keep his eyes glued to the floor, avoiding any eye contact with his babysitter. When Kim would ask about his day, Jaden's responses became increasingly brief and vague. One Saturday afternoon, as Kim folded laundry, she brought up the subject of Milda again. "How are things going with Milda, Jaden? Are you two getting along?" Jaden, who had been coloring at the kitchen table, suddenly went still. His crayon hovered over the paper, and his small frame seemed to tense up. "She's okay," he said softly, not looking up from his drawing. Kim paused, a t-shirt half folded in her hands. She wanted to dig deeper, to understand what was causing this change in her usually bubbly son. But as she opened her mouth to ask another question, her phone buzzed with a work email. She glanced at it, seeing an urgent request from her boss. With a heavy sigh, Kim set down the laundry and picked up her phone. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I need to take care of this for work. We'll talk more later, okay?" Jaden nodded silently, returning to his coloring with less enthusiasm than before. As Kim tapped out a response to her boss, she tried to push away the gnawing concern. Jaden was just shy, she told herself. He needed time to warm up to new people. And Milda came so highly recommended. Surely everything was fine. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, Kim trudged through the front door. Her shoulders sagged with the weight of another long day at work. She dropped her keys on the side table with a soft clatter and called out, "Jaden, honey, I'm home!" The house was unusually quiet. Kim's brow furrowed as she made her way to Jaden's room. She found him sitting on his bed, hugging his knees to his chest. His eyes were red-rimmed and he looked smaller than usual. "Hey, sweetie," Kim said softly, sitting down beside him. "How was your day?" Jaden didn't look up. He mumbled something so quietly that Kim had to lean in to hear him. "What was that, honey?" she asked, her heart starting to race. Jaden lifted his head slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The babysitter did it again." Kim's breath caught in her throat. "Did what again, Jaden?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. But Jaden just shook his head and buried his face in his knees again. Kim's mind raced. What could he mean? She thought back to all the times Jaden had seemed quiet or withdrawn lately. Was there something she had missed? She took a deep breath, trying to push away the rising panic. Kids said strange things sometimes, right? Maybe he was just tired or having a bad day. "Sweetie," Kim said gently, rubbing Jaden's back. "I'm sure everything's okay. Maybe you're just feeling a little down today?" Jaden didn't respond, and Kim felt a pang of guilt. She should stay and talk more, try to figure out what was bothering him. But her phone buzzed with another work email, and she felt the familiar pull of her job responsibilities. "How about we have your favorite dinner tonight?" Kim suggested, standing up. "I'll go start cooking, and you can come help when you're ready, okay? As she walked to the kitchen, Kim tried to shake off her unease. She decided she'd keep a closer eye on Jaden and Milda's interactions, just to be safe. But for now, she told herself, it was probably nothing to worry about. As the days passed, Jaden's behavior took a turn for the worse. His once bright eyes now seemed dull and distant, and his usual cheerful chatter had faded to near silence. Kim noticed the change with growing concern, her heart aching for her little boy. One night, Kim woke to the sound of muffled cries coming from Jaden's room. She rushed to his side, finding him tangled in his sheets, his face wet with tears. "Shh, it's okay, baby," Kim soothed, gathering him into her arms. "Mommy's here. It was just a bad dream." Jaden clung to her, his small body shaking. "Don't go," he whimpered. "Please don't leave me with her." Kim's stomach twisted. "With who, sweetie?" she asked gently, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Miss Milda," Jaden whispered, his voice trembling. Kim's mind raced. Milda had always seemed so kind and caring. Could she really be the source of Jaden's distress? It didn't make sense. The next morning, as Kim prepared to leave for work, Jaden's anxiety peaked. He clung to her leg, tears streaming down his face. "Please don't go, Mommy," he begged. "I don't want to stay with Miss Milda." Kim felt torn. She knelt down, looking into Jaden's frightened eyes. "Honey, I have to go to work, but I promise, everything will be okay." As she spoke the words, doubt gnawed at her. Was she doing the right thing? Should she stay home? But she couldn't afford to miss work, not with bills piling up. When Milda arrived, her smile was as warm as ever. "Good morning, Kim," she said cheerfully. "Hello there, Jaden. We're going to have a wonderful day together, aren't we?" Jaden shrank back, hiding behind Kim's legs. The contrast between Milda's friendliness and Jaden's fear left Kim feeling confused and conflicted. As she drove to work, Kim's mind was a whirlwind of worry and uncertainty. She trusted Milda, didn't she? The woman had come highly recommended, and she'd always been nothing but kind. But then why was Jaden so scared? Kim gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling helpless and unsure. She wanted to believe everything was fine, but her mother's instinct was screaming that something was very wrong. She just didn't know what to do about it. That night, as Kim tucked Jaden into bed, she noticed his eyes were filled with unshed tears. Her heart clenched at the sight. She sat on the edge of his bed, gently stroking his hair. "Sweetie, is everything okay?" she asked softly. Jaden bit his lip, looking away. Kim could see he was struggling with something. After a moment of silence, Jaden's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Miss Milda. She's mean to me." Kim's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, honey?" Jaden's lower lip trembled. "She calls me names, says I'm stupid and slow, and she yells at me for no reason." Tears welled up in Kim's eyes as she listened to her son's words. She pulled him close, hugging him tightly. "Oh, Jaden, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," Jaden mumbled into her shirt. "I thought you wouldn't believe me." Kim's heart broke at his words. She pulled back, looking into his eyes. "I always believe you, sweetie. Always." But as she held her son, doubt crept into Kim's mind. Could Milda really be so cruel? The woman had always seemed so kind and patient. Was Jaden exaggerating? Maybe he had misunderstood something Milda had said? Kim felt torn. She wanted to trust her son, but she also didn't want to accuse Milda without proof. What if it was all a misunderstanding? "I'll take care of this, okay?" Kim promised, kissing Jaden's forehead. "Try to get some sleep now." As she left Jaden's room, Kim's mind was in turmoil. She wanted to believe Jaden, but she also knew children could sometimes misinterpret things. She decided she needed more information before taking any drastic action. "I'll keep a closer eye on things," Kim thought to herself. "Maybe set up a nanny cam or come home early one day. I need to be sure before I do anything." Kim paced her living room, her heart heavy with worry and guilt. She held a small, discreet camera in her hand, turning it over and over as she debated her next move. The weight of her decision pressed down on her shoulders. "Is this really the right thing to do?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the quiet room. She glanced towards Jaden's bedroom where her son slept fitfully. The memory of his tear-stained face and trembling voice haunted her. Kim knew she had to do something, but the idea of spying on Milda felt wrong. With a deep sigh, Kim made up her mind. She carefully placed the camera on a bookshelf, angling it to capture most of the living room. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted it, making sure it was hidden from view. "I'm sorry, Milda," Kim murmured, "but I need to know the truth." As she stepped back to survey her handiwork, a wave of shame washed over her. Was she overreacting? Maybe Jaden had misunderstood something Milda had said. But then Kim remembered the fear in her son's eyes, and her resolve strengthened. That night, as Kim lay in bed, sleep eluded her. Her mind raced with possibilities of what the camera might reveal. Would she see the kind, patient Milda she thought she knew? Or would she witness something that confirmed her worst fears? The next morning, Kim struggled to act normally as she prepared to leave for work. She hugged Jaden extra tight, whispering words of love and encouragement in his ear. As Milda arrived, Kim forced a smile, all too aware of the hidden camera watching their every move. "Have a good day, sweetie," Kim called out as she left, her heart heavy with the weight of her secret. Throughout the day, Kim found it hard to concentrate on her work. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the camera hidden in her living room, silently recording everything that happened in her absence. She felt a mix of anticipation and dread at what she might discover when she got home. Kim's hands trembled as she inserted the memory card from the hidden camera into her laptop. Her heart raced, torn between hoping she was wrong and needing to know the truth. As the video began to play, she leaned in close, her eyes fixed on the screen. At first, everything seemed normal. Milda arrived, greeted Jaden with a smile, and began to tidy up the living room. Kim felt a flicker of relief, but it was short-lived. As she continued to watch, Kim's blood ran cold. Jaden accidentally spilled his juice while reaching for a coloring book. Instead of the patient response Kim expected, Milda's face contorted with anger. "You clumsy little brat," Milda hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Can't you do anything right?" Jaden's small frame shrank back, his eyes wide with fear. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Milda grabbed a handful of paper towels and thrust them at Jaden. "Clean it up, and don't expect any snacks today. Messy children don't deserve treats." Kim's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. She watched in horror as Milda continued to berate her son throughout the day, calling him names like stupid and worthless for the smallest of mistakes. The worst came when Jaden struggled with a math problem in his homework. Milda's patience snapped, and she roughly grabbed Jaden's arm, dragging him to a corner of the room. "You'll stay there until you learn to use that empty head of yours," Milda spat, forcing Jaden to face the wall. Tears streamed down Kim's face as she watched her son stand there, shoulders slumped, for what seemed like an eternity. The realization of what Jaden had been enduring hit her like a physical blow. "Oh, my baby," Kim sobbed, her heart breaking for her son. "I'm so sorry. I should have believed you." The weight of her guilt crashed down on her. How could she have missed the signs? How could she have let this go on for so long? Kim felt sick to her stomach, overwhelmed by the evidence of her son's suffering. Kim's hands shook as she dialed Milda's number. Her voice trembled with a mix of anger and fear as she asked the babysitter to come over immediately. While she waited, Kim paced the living room, her mind racing with all the things she wanted to say. When the doorbell rang, Kim took a deep breath and opened the door. Milda stood there, her usual pleasant smile in place. "Kim, what a surprise. Is everything all right?" Kim's jaw clenched as she ushered Milda inside. "We need to talk about Jaden," she said, her voice tight with emotion. Milda's eyebrows raised in mock concern. "Oh? Has he been misbehaving?" "I know what you've been doing," Kim blurted out, unable to contain herself any longer. "I saw the video. How could you treat my son like that?" For a moment, Milda's facade slipped, revealing a flash of anger before she quickly composed herself. "Video? I'm not sure what you mean, Kim. I've only been disciplining Jaden when necessary. Kim's fists clenched at her sides. Discipline? You call what I saw discipline? You've been verbally abusing my son, calling him horrible names, punishing him for no reason. Milda let out a forced laugh, waving her hand dismissively. Oh, Kim, you're overreacting. Children need a firm hand sometimes. Jaden can be quite challenging. Challenging? Kim's voice rose. He's a sweet, sensitive boy who's been nothing but polite to you. Milda's pleasant mask began to crack. Her eyes narrowed as she spoke, her true feelings seeping through. Well, some children just need more control. Especially ones like Jaden. You know how they can be. Kim felt as if she'd been slapped. The implication in Milda's words was clear, and it made her blood boil. What do you mean, ones like Jaden? She asked, her voice dangerously low. Milda's lips curled into a sneer. Come now, Kim. You know what I mean. Children from certain backgrounds. They need extra discipline to keep them in line. Kim's anger exploded. How dare you? She shouted, her whole body shaking with rage. Get out of my house right now. I never want to see you near my son again. As the door slammed shut behind Milda, Kim's anger gave way to a wave of overwhelming sadness. She rushed to Jaden's room, where he sat quietly on his bed, hugging his favorite stuffed animal. Oh, sweetie, Kim said, her voice breaking as she sat beside him. She wrapped her arms around Jaden, pulling him close. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you sooner. Jaden buried his face in his mother's shoulder, his small body trembling. It's okay, Mommy, he whispered. Kim's heart ached at his words. Even now, her brave little boy was trying to comfort her. She pulled back slightly, looking into Jaden's eyes. No, honey, it's not okay. What Milda did was very wrong, and I should have listened to you from the start. As she held her son, Kim's mind raced. She knew that simply sending Milda away wasn't enough. The woman had hurt her child, and there needed to be consequences. Jaden, Kim said gently, I need to make a very important phone call. Will you be okay for a few minutes? Jaden nodded, clutching his stuffed animal tighter. Kim kissed his forehead and stood up, her hands shaking as she reached for her phone. In the kitchen, Kim dialed 911, her heart pounding. When the operator answered, she took a deep breath. I need to report a case of child abuse, she said, her voice quivering. As Kim explained the situation to the police, a mix of emotions swirled inside her. Guilt gnawed at her stomach. How could she have let this go on for so long? But alongside the guilt was a fierce determination. She would do whatever it took to protect her son and make sure Milda faced justice for her actions. After hanging up, Kim returned to Jaden's room. She sat down next to him, pulling him into another hug. The police are coming, sweetie, she explained softly. They're going to help us make sure Milda can't hurt you or any other children ever again. The police arrived at Kim's house within minutes of her call. 2 officers, a man and a woman, knocked gently on the door. Kim answered, her face etched with worry and determination. Ma'am, we're here about the reported child abuse, the female officer said softly. Can you tell us what happened? Kim nodded, inviting them inside. She glanced towards Jaden's room, where her son was still curled up on his bed. It's my babysitter, she explained, her voice trembling. I have video evidence of her mistreating my son. The officers listened intently as Kim recounted the events, their faces growing serious. When she mentioned the hidden camera footage, the male officer asked, Do you have that footage available, ma'am? Kim nodded, retrieving her laptop. As the officers watched the video, their expressions hardened. The female officer turned to Kim, her voice gentle but firm. We'll need to take this as evidence. We're also going to need to speak with your son. Kim's heart raced as she led the officers to Jaden's room. She knelt beside her son, stroking his hair. Jaden, honey, these police officers need to ask you some questions about Milda. Can you be brave for me? Jaden looked up, his eyes wide with fear. But as he met his mother's gaze, he nodded slowly. The female officer sat down, speaking softly to Jaden as Kim watched, her heart breaking all over again. After taking Jaden's statement, the officers informed Kim they would be arresting Milda. Kim felt a surge of relief mixed with regret. As the police left to apprehend Milda, Kim sat on the couch, her head in her hands. "I should have acted sooner," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "How could I have let this go on for so long?" Jaden approached his mother, wrapping his small arms around her. "It's okay, Mommy," he said. "You believed me in the end." Kim hugged her son tightly, a wave of determination washing over her. She would see this through. She would make sure Milda faced justice for what she had done, and most importantly, she would help her son heal from this traumatic experience. As the days passed, Kim found herself caught in a whirlwind of police interviews and legal consultations. The investigation into Milda's actions had uncovered a disturbing pattern of behavior that left Kim feeling sick to her stomach. One afternoon, Detective Sarah Thompson sat across from Kim at their kitchen table, her face grim as she shared the latest findings. "We've discovered that Milda has a history of similar incidents," she said softly, her eyes filled with concern. "Several families have come forward, all with children from minority backgrounds." Kim's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. How is this possible?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Detective Thompson sighed heavily. "Unfortunately, many of these cases went unreported or were dismissed due to lack of evidence. Your video footage has been crucial in bringing this to light." Kim felt a mix of emotions wash over her: anger, sadness, and a deep sense of responsibility. She looked towards Jaden's room, where her son was napping, and felt a renewed determination to see justice served. The next day, Kim met with a lawyer recommended by the police department. As she sat in the plush office, surrounded by law books and certificates, Kim felt small and overwhelmed. "Mrs. Chen," the lawyer began, her voice kind but professional, "I understand this is a difficult situation, but I want you to know that we have a strong case against Milda." Kim nodded, trying to absorb the information as the lawyer explained the legal process. Terms like criminal charges, civil suit, and testimony swirled in her mind, making her head spin. It's all so much," Kim admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to protect my son and make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else's child." The lawyer reached out, patting Kim's hand gently. "That's exactly why we're here, Mrs. Chen. Your bravery in coming forward is going to make a real difference." As Kim left the office, she felt a mix of hope and trepidation. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but she knew it was necessary. For Jaden and for all the children who had suffered in silence, she would see this through. As the days passed, Jaden's behavior began to change in ways that broke Kim's heart. Even though Milda was no longer around, the little boy seemed to carry the weight of his experiences like a heavy backpack. One morning, as Kim prepared to leave for work, Jaden clung to her leg, his small hands gripping her pants tightly. "Please don't go, Mommy," he whimpered, his eyes brimming with tears. "What if the bad lady comes back?" Kim knelt down, wrapping her arms around her son. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly, her own voice thick with emotion. "Milda won't ever come back. You're safe now." But her words seemed to offer little comfort. Jaden's fear lingered, manifesting in nightmares that left him screaming in the middle of the night. During the day, he became withdrawn, barely speaking and jumping at sudden noises. Kim watched helplessly as her once vibrant son retreated into himself. She tried everything she could think of: extra hugs, favorite meals, new toys, but nothing seemed to break through the wall of fear Jaden had built around himself. One evening, after tucking Jaden into bed, Kim sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. She felt lost, unsure of how to help her son heal from the trauma he'd endured. That's when she remembered a pamphlet the detective had given her, with information about child psychologists specializing in trauma. With trembling hands, Kim dialed the number. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Kim. I need help for my son." The next day, Kim found herself sitting in a warm, colorful office, posters of smiling children decorating the walls. Dr. Laura Simmons, a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes, listened intently as Kim poured out her worries. What you're describing is not uncommon for children who have experienced trauma, Dr. Simmons explained, her voice soothing. Jaden is showing signs of anxiety and post-traumatic stress, but with the right support, children are incredibly resilient. We can help him heal. Kim felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. What can I do? She asked eagerly, leaning forward in her chair. Dr. Simmons smiled warmly. First, we'll set up some sessions with Jaden. Play therapy can be incredibly helpful for children his age, and for you, we'll discuss strategies to create a safe, nurturing environment at home. As Kim left the office, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer alone in helping Jaden heal. With professional help and her unwavering love, Kim knew they would find their way back to happiness, one small step at a time. As Kim left Dr. Simmons's office, her mind raced with thoughts of how to best help Jaden. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to do whatever it took to help her son heal. The next day, Kim sat down with Dr. Simmons again, this time to discuss a more detailed plan for Jaden's recovery. The psychologist's gentle voice filled the room as she explained, "Jaden needs to feel safe and supported right now. It's crucial that he knows he's not alone in this journey." Kim nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of worry and determination. "What can I do to help him feel secure?" she asked, leaning forward in her chair. Dr. Simmons smiled softly. "Consistency is key. Jaden needs to know that you're there for him, always. It's important to create a routine that he can rely on and to be patient with his progress. Recovery will take time, but with love and support, he will get better." As the psychologist's words sank in, Kim felt a surge of resolve. She knew what she had to do. "I'm going to take time off from work," she said, her voice firm with decision. "Jaden needs me now more than ever, and I want to be there for him every step of the way." Dr. Simmons nodded approvingly. "That's a wonderful idea, Kim. Your presence and attention will be invaluable to Jaden's healing process." Later that evening, Kim sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen. With a deep breath, she began typing an email to her boss, explaining the situation and requesting an extended leave of absence. As she hit send, she felt a mix of anxiety and relief wash over her. "It's the right thing to do," she whispered to herself, her eyes drifting to a photo of Jaden on the fridge. His smiling face reminded her of the happy, carefree boy he once was, the boy she was determined to help him become again. Kim closed her laptop and walked to Jaden's room. She found him curled up in bed, clutching his favorite stuffed animal. Gently, she sat on the edge of the bed and stroked his hair. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "I want you to know that I'm going to be home a lot more now. We're going to get through this together, okay?" The day of Milda's court hearing arrived, casting a somber shadow over Kim's morning. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her blouse with trembling hands. The weight of the day ahead pressed heavily on her shoulders. "You can do this," Kim whispered to her reflection, drawing strength from the determination in her own eyes. As Kim entered the courtroom, the hushed atmosphere enveloped her. She took a seat, her heart pounding in her chest. The proceedings began, and Kim's eyes locked onto Milda as she was led in. Milda's face was a mask of calm indifference as she pleaded not guilty. Her voice rang out clear and steady, but Kim could see a flicker of unease in her eyes. The prosecutor presented the case, laying out the charges against Milda. Kim's stomach churned as she relived the painful memories of Jaden's suffering, but she held her head high, reminding herself why she was there. Then came the moment Kim had been dreading and anticipating, the playing of the footage. As the video began, the courtroom fell into a tense silence. Kim watched Milda's face, seeing the woman's composure crack as the evidence of her actions played out before everyone. Milda's eyes widened, her lips trembling as she watched herself on screen, berating and belittling Jaden. The mask of innocence she had worn began to crumble, replaced by a look of shock and dismay. The judge, a stern-faced woman with graying hair, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she watched the footage. Her expression grew increasingly grave with each passing moment. As the video ended, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. The judge turned her piercing gaze to Milda, who now sat slumped in her chair, all pretense of innocence gone. "This is a serious case," the judge said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The evidence presented is deeply troubling. Given the nature of these actions, I am considering assigning community service as part of the sentence." Kim felt a mix of relief and vindication wash over her. She glanced at Milda, seeing the woman's defeated posture, and felt a complex swirl of emotions: anger, pity, and a fierce protectiveness for Jaden. The judge cleared her throat, her eyes scanning the courtroom before settling on Milda. "After careful consideration of the evidence presented and the severity of your actions, I have reached a decision," she announced, her voice firm and unyielding. Kim held her breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for the sentence. "Milda Thompson," the judge continued, "you are hereby sentenced to 500 hours of community service, to be completed over the next 12 months. This service will specifically involve working with children from diverse backgrounds at the Harmony House Community Center." A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. Milda's face paled, her eyes widening in disbelief. The judge's gaze hardened as she addressed Milda directly. "It is my hope that through this service you will come to understand the harm you have caused and the importance of treating all children with kindness and respect regardless of their background." Kim felt a wave of relief wash over her. While a part of her had wanted a harsher punishment, she realized that this sentence might actually lead to meaningful change. She glanced at Milda, noting the woman's shocked expression, and felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this experience would open her eyes. As the court adjourned, Kim stood up, her legs slightly shaky. She took a deep breath, feeling as though a heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Justice had been served, and now the healing could truly begin. Walking out of the courtroom, Kim's thoughts turned to Jaden. She imagined telling him about the outcome, hoping it would bring him some comfort. She pictured the community service Milda would have to do, working with children from all walks of life. Kim silently prayed that this experience would force Milda to confront her prejudices and recognize the damage she had inflicted. Kim spent more time at home with Jaden, her heart aching to see her once bubbly son so withdrawn. She knew it would take time, but she was determined to help him feel safe and loved again. Every morning, Kim woke up early to make Jaden's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. She'd watch with a mixture of hope and sadness as a small smile would flicker across his face before quickly disappearing. "Hey, buddy," she'd say, softly ruffling his hair. "What do you want to do today?" At first, Jaden would just shrug, his eyes downcast. But as the days passed, he began to open up a little more. Can we build a fort?" he asked one rainy afternoon, his voice barely above a whisper. Kim's heart soared. "Of course we can, sweetie. That's a great idea." They spent hours draping blankets over chairs, creating a cozy hideaway in the living room. Kim watched as Jaden's eyes lit up, a glimpse of his old self shining through. But there were still moments that broke Kim's heart. Sometimes a loud noise would make Jaden jump, his eyes wide with fear. Other times he'd cling to Kim when she had to leave the room, afraid she might not come back. "It's okay, baby," she'd soothe, holding him close. "Mommy's right here. I'm not going anywhere." Slowly but surely, Kim noticed small changes. Jaden started laughing more at the silly jokes she'd tell. He began to play with his toys again, creating elaborate stories with his action figures. One evening, as they cuddled on the couch watching a movie, Jaden looked up at Kim, his eyes serious. "Mom?" he said softly. "Yes, honey?" "Thank you for believing me." Kim felt tears prick her eyes. She pulled Jaden close, kissing the top of his head. "I will always believe you, Jaden. Always. And I'm so sorry I didn't listen sooner." Jaden nodded, snuggling closer. It wasn't perfect, and Kim knew there was still a long road ahead. But in that moment, she felt a glimmer of hope. They were healing, one day at a time. As the days passed, Kim noticed Jaden becoming more comfortable in their little bubble of safety. One evening, as they sat together on the porch swing, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jaden's small voice broke the peaceful silence. "Mom?" he said, his eyes fixed on his fidgeting hands. "Yes, sweetheart," Kim replied, giving him her full attention. Jaden took a deep breath, his little shoulders rising and falling. I want to tell you about the bad times with Milda." Kim's heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm here, Jaden. You can tell me anything." Slowly, haltingly, Jaden began to share. He told her about the harsh words Milda would use, calling him stupid and worthless. He described how she'd make him stand in the corner for hours if he made even the tiniest mistake. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he recounted how scared he felt every time Kim left for work. "I wanted to tell you so bad, Mom," Jaden whispered, his voice trembling. "But I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. Milda said no one would." Kim pulled Jaden into her arms, her own tears falling freely. "Oh, my brave boy," she murmured, rocking him gently. "I'm so sorry you went through that, but you did the right thing by telling me the truth." She pulled back slightly, looking into Jaden's tear-stained face. "I want you to know something, Jaden. You are so strong and so brave for speaking up. What Milda did was wrong, and it wasn't your fault. Not one bit of it." Jaden nodded, sniffling. "Really?" "Really," Kim affirmed. "And I promise you, Jaden, I will never, ever leave you with anyone who would hurt you again. You're safe now, and I'll always protect you." Jaden's arms tightened around Kim's waist. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I love you too, sweetie," Kim replied, her voice thick with emotion. "More than anything in this world." Kim hesitated at the door of the community center, her hand trembling on the doorknob. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. With a final surge of courage, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was warm and welcoming, filled with the soft murmur of voices. A circle of chairs occupied the center, and Kim saw women of various ages already seated, their faces etched with a mix of pain and hope. A kind-faced woman approached her, smiling gently. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Sarah, the group facilitator. You must be Kim." Kim nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, I'm not sure if I should be here." Sarah placed a comforting hand on Kim's arm. "You're exactly where you need to be. We're all here to support each other." As Kim took her seat, she felt the weight of eyes upon her, but there was no judgment in those gazes, only understanding. Sarah began the session, and one by one, the women shared their stories. Kim listened, her heart aching for these mothers who, like her, had seen their children suffer. When it was her turn, Kim's voice quavered as she began to speak. "My son, Jaden, he was hurt by someone I trusted." The words tumbled out, haltingly at first, then in a rush. She told them about Milda, about her own guilt for not seeing the signs sooner, about the fear that still lingered in Jaden's eyes. As she spoke, Kim felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The other mothers nodded in sympathy, some wiping away tears. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment, before a woman across from her spoke up. "You're so brave, Kim," she said softly. "And you're not alone. We've all felt that guilt, that fear. But you're here now, and that's what matters." Others chimed in with words of support and encouragement. Kim felt tears welling up, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of sorrow or guilt. She felt a spark of hope ignite in her heart. As the session drew to a close, Kim realized she had found something precious, a community of women who understood her pain and her journey. She wasn't alone in this struggle, and that knowledge gave her strength. The judge sat behind her desk, her eyes scanning the report in front of her. Milda stood nervously before her, hands clasped tightly together. The community center supervisor, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Santos, stood beside Milda. "Well, Milda," the judge began, looking up from the papers, "it seems you've been making progress with your community service. Mrs. Santos, would you care to elaborate?" Mrs. Santos nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Milda has been working with children from various backgrounds at our center. At first, she was hesitant and kept to herself, but over time, we've seen a change in her approach." Milda shifted uncomfortably, her eyes fixed on the floor. The judge noticed her unease and asked, "Milda, How do you feel about your work at the center?" For a moment, Milda was silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "It's opened my eyes, Your Honor." The judge leaned forward, intrigued. "How so?" Milda took a deep breath. "I've seen how my actions affected the children. I never realized how much words could hurt. There's this little boy, Tommy. He reminds me of Jaden. One day I saw another child say something mean to him, and I saw the pain in his eyes. It was like looking at Jaden all over again." Tears welled up in Milda's eyes as she continued. "I suddenly understood what I had done. The fear, the hurt. I caused that. And for what? Because of my own stupid ideas about how children should be." Mrs. Santos placed a comforting hand on Milda's shoulder. "Milda has been working hard to overcome her biases. She's been participating in our diversity workshops and has even started mentoring some of the children." The judge nodded, her expression softening slightly. "It seems you're beginning to understand the gravity of your actions, Milda. That's an important step. But remember, realizing your mistakes is just the beginning. You must continue to work on yourself and make amends for the harm you've caused." Milda nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know, Your Honor. I can't change what I did to Jaden, but I promise I'll keep trying to be better. Those kids at the center, they've taught me so much. I never want to hurt another child again." One afternoon, Kim's heart raced as she sat in the small cafe, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. She had agreed to meet Milda, but now she wondered if it was a mistake. The bell above the door chimed, and Kim looked up to see Milda walk in, looking smaller and more subdued than she remembered. Milda approached the table hesitantly. "Thank you for meeting me, Kim," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Kim nodded stiffly, gesturing for Milda to sit. "I'm here to listen," she said, her tone guarded. Milda took a deep breath. I wanted to apologize," she began, her eyes fixed on her hands. "What I did to Jaden was inexcusable. I know that now." Kim felt a surge of anger at the mention of her son's name. "Do you really understand what you did?" she asked, her voice tight with emotion. Milda looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was so wrong. Working at the community center has shown me how much damage I caused. I see it in the faces of the children there, especially in a little boy named Tommy. He reminds me so much of Jaden." Kim listened, her heart torn between skepticism and a glimmer of hope. Could Milda have really changed? Or was this just another act? "I know I can never undo what I did," Milda continued, her voice breaking. "But I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I'm working hard to change, to be better." Kim studied Milda's face, searching for any sign of deceit, but all she saw was remorse and shame. Still, she couldn't forget the pain Jaden had endured. Kim listened intently as Milda continued to speak, her voice thick with emotion. "I know words aren't enough," Milda said, wringing her hands. "But I want to apologize to both you and Jaden. What I did was terrible, and I can't even begin to understand the pain I caused." Tears welled up in Kim's eyes as she remembered Jaden's fear and distress. She nodded, encouraging Milda to continue. "Working at the community center has opened my eyes," Milda explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've met so many wonderful children from different backgrounds. It made me realize how wrong I was, how harmful my prejudices were." Kim watched as Milda's shoulders slumped, the weight of her actions visible in her posture. "There was this little girl, Aisha," Milda continued. "She reminded me so much of Jaden, bright, curious, and so full of life. Seeing her smile and grow made me understand the damage I could have done to Jaden's spirit." Milda looked up, meeting Kim's gaze with tear-filled eyes. "I know I can never take back what I did, but I want you to know that I'm committed to changing. I'm learning, growing, and trying to be a better person every day." Kim felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: anger, sadness, and a tiny spark of hope. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Milda, I appreciate your apology. It means a lot to hear that you understand the gravity of what you did," Kim said slowly. "But you have to understand it doesn't erase what happened. Jaden is still struggling because of what you did." Milda nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I hope that maybe knowing I'm trying to change might help in some small way." Kim sat back, conflicting emotions swirling inside her. Part of her wanted to believe Milda had changed, while another part remained wary, protective of Jaden. Milda nodded, wiping away a tear. "I was wondering if it would be possible for me to apologize to Jaden directly. Only if you and he are comfortable with it, of course. I understand if it's too much to ask." Kim paused, considering the request. She thought about Jaden, about how far he'd come in his healing process. "I'll have to think about it," she said finally. "Jaden's well-being comes first, and I'm not sure if he's ready for that." "Of course," Milda replied quickly. "I completely understand. I just want you both to know how sorry I am and that I'm working hard to change." That evening, Kim gently sat down next to Jaden on his bed, her heart heavy with the weight of their recent conversation with Milda. She watched her son's face carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. "How are you feeling, sweetie?" she asked softly, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Jaden was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Kim waited patiently, knowing her son needed time to process his emotions. Finally, Jaden looked up at her with his big brown eyes. I feel a little better, Mom," he said hesitantly. Kim's heart swelled with love and pride. "You do? Can you tell me why?" Jaden nodded slowly. "It's just, Milda said she knows what she did was wrong, and she's trying to be better." He paused, fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. "It makes me feel like maybe it wasn't my fault after all." Tears pricked at Kim's eyes as she pulled Jaden into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured into his hair. "It was never, ever your fault. Not for a single second." She felt Jaden relax into her embrace, his small arms wrapping around her waist. "I'm so proud of you, Jaden," Kim said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've been so brave through all of this." Jaden looked up at her, a tiny smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Really?" "Really," Kim affirmed, gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down Jaden's cheek. "You're the bravest boy I know. And I want you to know something important, okay?" Jaden nodded, his eyes wide and attentive. Kim took a deep breath, her voice steady and filled with conviction. "You never, ever have to face anything like this again. I promise you, Jaden. I will always be here to protect you, to listen to you, and to believe you. No matter what." The next afternoon, Kim and Jaden walked hand in hand to the local park where they had agreed to meet Milda. Kim could feel Jaden's palm growing sweaty in hers, and she gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay, sweetie," she said softly. "I'm right here with you." Jaden nodded, his eyes darting around nervously as they approached the park bench where Milda was already waiting. The older woman stood up as they neared, her face etched with remorse. "Hello, Kim. Hello, Jaden," Milda greeted them, her voice subdued. Kim nodded in acknowledgement, then looked down at Jaden. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. Jaden took a deep breath and nodded. Milda knelt down to Jaden's eye level, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Jaden," she began, her voice quivering slightly. "I wanted to talk to you directly and tell you how sorry I am for everything I did." Jaden's grip on Kim's hand tightened, but he stayed silent, watching Milda with wary eyes. "I understand now that what I did was very, very wrong," Milda continued, her eyes brimming with tears. "I was unkind to you. I said mean things and punished you unfairly. I made you feel scared and alone, and that was terrible of me." Kim watched her son's face carefully, ready to step in if he showed any signs of distress. But Jaden remained calm, listening intently to Milda's words. Working with other children has taught me so much, Milda said, her voice growing stronger. I've learned that every child is special and deserves kindness and respect. I'm so sorry that I didn't treat you that way, Jaden. You didn't deserve any of the bad things I did or said. Jaden's shoulders relaxed slightly, and he glanced up at Kim before looking back at Milda. Do you really mean it? He asked in a small voice. Milda nodded earnestly. I do, Jaden. I really, truly mean it. I know I can't change what happened, but I want you to know that I understand how wrong I was. You're a wonderful boy, and I'm so sorry for hurting you. Kim's heart swelled with love and pride as she watched Jaden helping her set the table for dinner. Over the past few weeks, she had noticed small but significant changes in her son. His smile came more easily and his laughter rang out more often. It was as if a heavy cloud had finally lifted from their home. As Jaden carefully placed the last fork on the table, Kim made a decision. She wanted to celebrate her son's bravery and show him just how much support he had around him. Jaden, honey, Kim called out. Can you go to your room for a bit? I need to make a few phone calls. Jaden nodded and trotted off to his room. As soon as he was out of earshot, Kim grabbed her phone and started dialing. She called her parents, her sister, and a few close friends who had been there for them during the difficult times. Hi, it's Kim, she whispered into the phone, her excitement barely contained. I'm throwing a surprise party for Jaden tomorrow afternoon. Can you make it? One by one, everyone agreed to come. Kim's heart raced with anticipation as she imagined the look on Jaden's face when he saw all the people who cared about him. The next day, while Jaden was at school, Kim busied herself with preparations. She hung colorful streamers around the living room, blew up balloons, and baked Jaden's favorite chocolate cake. As the afternoon approached, guests began to arrive, each carrying small gifts and warm smiles. When Kim went to pick up Jaden from school, she could barely contain her excitement. How about we go to the park, she suggested, trying to buy time for the last few guests to arrive. As they walked through the front door an hour later, Jaden's eyes widened in surprise. Surprise! Everyone shouted, grinning from ear to ear. Jaden stood frozen for a moment, his mouth agape. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Is this for me? He asked, looking up at Kim with wonder in his eyes. Kim knelt down beside him, wrapping him in a tight hug. Yes, sweetie, we're all so proud of you for being so brave. We wanted to show you how much we love and support you. Tears welled up in Jaden's eyes, but this time, they were tears of joy. He looked around the room at all the smiling faces, his grandparents, his aunt, and his mom's closest friends. Each person there had played a part in helping him through the tough times. As the party continued, Kim slipped away to her bedroom. She returned moments later with a carefully wrapped package, her eyes twinkling with excitement. Jaden, she called out, I have a special surprise for you. Jaden turned, curiosity written all over his face. He approached his mom, eyeing the package with wonder. What is it? He asked, his voice filled with anticipation. Open it and see, Kim encouraged, handing him the gift. With trembling fingers, Jaden tore away the wrapping paper. As the last piece fell away, he gasped. In his hands was a bright red cape, emblazoned with a golden J in the center. The fabric shimmered in the light, soft and strong at the same time. It's a superhero cape, Kim explained, her voice thick with emotion. Because you, Jaden, are my superhero. You were so brave and strong. This cape is to remind you of that strength and courage. Jaden's eyes widened, filling with tears of joy. Without a word, he threw his arms around Kim, hugging her tightly. Thank you, Mom, he whispered. Kim helped Jaden put on the cape, tying it securely around his shoulders. As soon as it was on, a transformation seemed to come over him. He stood a little taller, his chin lifted with newfound confidence. Look at me, Jaden shouted, running to the backyard where his friends were playing. I'm a superhero. The other children cheered, gathering around Jaden to admire his new cape. Soon they were all running around the yard, pretending to be superheroes alongside Jaden. Their laughter filled the air, a joyous sound that seemed to chase away the last remnants of darkness. Kim stood on the porch watching the scene unfold. Her heart swelled with pride as she saw Jaden zooming around, his cape fluttering behind him. His face was lit up with pure happiness, his laughter ringing out loud and clear. For the first time in what felt like ages, Kim saw her son truly happy again. The sight brought tears to her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy and relief. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but seeing Jaden like this filled her with hope for the future. As summer turned to fall, the local support group Kim had joined decided to organize a special event. They called it Heroes Day, a celebration to honor those who had bravely spoken out against injustice. The entire community rallied behind the idea, eager to show their support. On the day of the event, the town square was transformed. Colorful banners hung from lampposts, and a small stage had been set up in the center. People of all ages gathered, their faces filled with anticipation and hope. Kim and Jaden arrived early, hand in hand. Jaden wore his superhero cape, which had become a source of comfort and strength for him. As they approached the square, Kim could feel Jaden's hand tighten around hers. "It's okay, sweetie," she reassured him. "Everyone here is so proud of you." The event began with speeches from community leaders and counselors. They spoke about the importance of speaking up and standing together against abuse and discrimination. Kim listened intently, her heart swelling with pride as she thought of Jaden's bravery. Then came the moment they had been waiting for. The host called out, "And now we'd like to honor some very special heroes among us. These children have shown incredible courage in the face of adversity." One by one, children were called to the stage. Each was presented with a certificate and a small medal. When it was Jaden's turn, the host said, "Jaden, for your bravery in speaking out against mistreatment, we honor you as one of our community heroes." Jaden hesitated for a moment, looking up at Kim. She nodded encouragingly, and he walked up to the stage, his cape flowing behind him. As he accepted his award, the crowd erupted in applause. Jaden's face broke into a wide smile, his eyes shining with pride and happiness. Kim watched from the audience, tears of joy streaming down her face. She saw her son standing tall, no longer the scared little boy who had suffered in silence. He had become a symbol of courage for other children, a real-life superhero. As Jaden stood on stage with the other children, Kim couldn't hold back her tears. She watched her son, once so withdrawn and afraid, now beaming with pride as he waved to the cheering crowd. The superhero cape fluttered behind him, a symbol of the strength he had found within himself. The host spoke into the microphone. "These children have faced challenges that no one should have to endure, but they've shown us what true courage looks like. They are our real-life superheroes." The crowd erupted in applause once more. Jaden's smile grew even wider as he looked out at the sea of supportive faces. His eyes searched the crowd until they found Kim's. When their gazes met, Kim felt a surge of love and pride so strong it nearly took her breath away. As the children were led off the stage, Kim made her way through the crowd to meet Jaden. When she reached him, she knelt down and wrapped him in a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, sweetie," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jaden hugged her back just as tightly. "I love you, Mom," he said. As they pulled apart, Kim noticed something different in Jaden's eyes. The fear and uncertainty that had lingered there for so long were gone, replaced by a newfound confidence and joy. People came up to congratulate Jaden, patting him on the back and praising his bravery. Kim watched as her son, who had once been too scared to speak up, now chatted easily with strangers, accepting their kind words with grace. In that moment, Kim realized that this event was more than just a celebration. It was a turning point for both of them. The dark cloud that had hung over their lives for so long was finally starting to lift. They were healing, together. As the event wound down, Kim and Jaden walked hand in hand through the town square. The air was filled with laughter and the chatter of families sharing stories of hope and resilience. As Kim and Jaden walked home from the Heroes Day event, hand in hand, Kim found herself lost in thought. The warm evening sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. She glanced down at Jaden, who was still wearing his superhero cape with pride. Kim's heart swelled with love and admiration for her son. She thought back to the scared, withdrawn little boy he had been just a few months ago, and marveled at the transformation she saw before her now. Jaden was smiling, his eyes bright with newfound confidence. As they turned onto their street, Kim realized how much their relationship had changed. The ordeal with Milda had been painful and frightening, but it had also brought them closer together. They had faced the darkness side by side and emerged stronger for it. Kim squeezed Jaden's hand gently, and he looked up at her with a questioning expression. "You know I love you more than anything in the world, right?" she said softly. Jaden nodded, his smile widening. "I love you too, Mom." In that moment, Kim made a silent promise to herself. She vowed to always be there for Jaden, to listen to him no matter what. She remembered the guilt she had felt when she first dismissed his concerns about Milda, and she was determined never to make that mistake again. "Jaden," she said, stopping and kneeling down to his level, "I want you to know that you can always talk to me about anything. No matter what's bothering you, I'll always listen and believe you. We're a team, you and me." Jaden's eyes glistened with tears, but his smile never faltered. He threw his arms around Kim's neck, hugging her tightly. "I know, Mom. We're the best team ever." As they continued their walk home, Kim felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey had been difficult, but it had taught her the true meaning of unconditional love and trust. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she and Jaden would face them together, their bond stronger than ever. As Kim and Jaden approached their home, the sun was setting, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink. The events of the day had left them both feeling tired but content. Jaden's superhero cape fluttered gently in the evening breeze as they walked up the driveway. Once inside, Kim helped Jaden take off his shoes and hang up his cape. She couldn't help but smile at how carefully he handled it, treating it like a precious treasure. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling excitement of the Heroes' Day event. "How about some hot chocolate before bed?" Kim asked, ruffling Jaden's hair affectionately. Jaden's eyes lit up. "Yes, please," he exclaimed, following his mom into the kitchen. As Kim prepared their drinks, Jaden sat at the kitchen table, his legs swinging back and forth. He seemed lost in thought, his brow furrowed slightly. Kim noticed this and wondered what was going through her son's mind. She set the steaming mugs on the table and sat down across from Jaden. They sipped their hot chocolate in comfortable silence for a few moments before Jaden spoke up. "Mom," he said, his voice soft and a little uncertain. "Yes, sweetheart," Kim replied, giving him her full attention. Jaden hesitated for a moment, then looked up at his mother with wide, earnest eyes. "I'm a hero now, right, Mom?" Kim felt her heart swell with love and pride. She reached across the table and took Jaden's small hand in hers. Tears welled up in her eyes as she gazed at her brave, wonderful son. With a voice full of emotion, Kim replied, "You always were, sweetheart." Jaden's face broke into a bright smile, and he jumped up from his chair. Kim opened her arms, and Jaden rushed into them, wrapping his arms tightly around her waist. Kim held him close, savoring the warmth of their embrace and the love that flowed between them. As they hugged, Kim felt a profound sense of hope wash over her. They had been through so much, but here they were, stronger and closer than ever. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. If you enjoyed the story of Kim and Jaden, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.